Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another live stream. My, let me mute that real quick. There we go. How's it going, everybody? My name is Joshua Griffith. I'm a local storm chaser in the North Georgia area. I came on today. I want to talk about the latest on Tropical Storm Ian, future major hurricane Ian. Um, as Just talk about the latest as it heads into the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean. Um, and kind of discuss with you guys, answer some questions or anything, anything that comes up, anything you guys think of. But yeah. So let me make sure that I think my stream's working. I could hear it, but I want to make sure everything's up. I gotta pull up the chat here, so give me just a minute. Let me see. Let me see here. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Now I can see you pull the chat up on my phone there. Um, yeah. So basically, right now we have the current update on Ian. It's a tropical storm. Maximum sustained winds are 50 miles an hour. It is currently headed northwest. Supposed to become a hurricane early tomorrow. Right as it passes the Western Cayman Islands. Right now, hurricane warnings are up for the Cayman Islands and parts of Western Cuba. So definitely time to get your final preparations there as this passes pretty close to the Cayman Islands and eventually over Cuba as a possibly a major hurricane by that point, early on Tuesday. So this is the short range forecast. We'll go into detail about this here in a minute, but let's look at the weather models right now. So right now, this is the latest GFS, the noon run. Um, you can see we've got this is Ian right here down in the central Caribbean. And as we progress this, here it is, strengthening very quickly as it enters a very favorable environment over the Western Caribbean and as it enters the Gulf of Mexico. Heads on over to Cuba, still strengthening. Makes it into the Gulf of Mexico, which has very, very warm sea surface temperatures this time of year. And really wants to rapidly strengthen this as it heads into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, we'll go through a bunch of the different weather models to talk about like the differences in track that they've been showing, the inconsistencies, and kind of try to just talk about the different paths this thing could take on its way to the Gulf Coast. But shows a very strong storm. This is probably a 944. That's probably a Category 4 hurricane, um, right there in the Gulf. 942, yeah, probably Category 4. But so the GFS has it going west of Florida, west of the Panhandle, or west of the peninsula of Florida, moving on up north and makes landfall in the Panhandle, Big Bend area. So, but it's interesting that right here it shows it weakening. It has it as a 942 very strong storm right here in the Central Gulf. Then as soon as it gets north and approaches land, it's down to a 980, 992 around landfall. So we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Here's the latest European model run. European has been generally more east than the GFS, which is the American model. Has it hitting Cuba, still a strengthening, probably high end Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane. And, but you can see it turns east right here. Instead of just heading straight north, kind of meandering its way toward the Panhandle, it side swipes the western Gulf Coast of Florida, and then eventually slowly moves its way inland. Very slowly. It almost stalls out the hurricane. It pretty much does. I mean, this is 84 hours out. That's 99 hours out. I mean, it's just stuck there. It's just not moving. And the models have been liking the idea of this slowing down big time before landfall. But you can see it's this would be a stronger hit if it were to turn east and hit Florida this far south. The main reason why it wants to weaken is there's a cold front and a trough over the eastern U.S., and that cold front and all that dry air would probably hit the system pretty hard. So if it turns east before that makes it to it, it would probably hit the state of Florida as a stronger storm, possibly even a major hurricane. But if it stays farther north, it would probably be a weaker storm. But yeah, so it just barely moves into the state of Florida, starts heading north, and then eventually up into the southeast. We'll talk more about that in a minute here too. Um, but it's kind of just a scary situation for the whole state of Florida. Should be on alert for this because there's a lot of different ways this thing could go. The Canadian model, we'll take a look at the Canadian model, has a much weaker storm passing over Cuba, but the CMC or the Canadian model has been typically weaker um, than it probably should be, in my opinion. I'd have to side more with the GFS and the European on strength, but still has a Category 2 hurricane right here just off the west coast of Florida. And likes the idea of it almost. It looks like it's kind of gonna turn east a little bit, but then it stalls out almost, and then just heads north. Right here, and doesn't weaken as much as some of the other models do, but still does some. But probably still a high-end Category 1 hurricane, Category 2 right there, as it hits the Florida Panhandle, and then moves on up into Georgia in the southeast. So now the icon model. Um, sorry guys, taking a minute to load here. Here we go. Has a this one's a little bit stronger than the Canadian. Has a Category 2 hurricane, 982 millibar low pressure, right over western Cuba, and I think western Cuba is going to get hit pretty hard. I think it will be very close to major hurricane status, if not when it reaches Cuba. But that far western tip of Cuba is going to get hit pretty hard by the center of this storm. Um, you can see it. The icon likes the idea of following the European model, having it move into Florida as a probably. This could be a major hurricane that the icon's showing. 956. That's most likely a Category 3 hurricane. Um, moving through Florida, and then almost gets it off the coast again, but it moves up into the southeast like the other models show. Um, Navjet model, pretty much the same thing. Strong, almost like borderline major hurricane. Just brushing the western tip of Cuba up into the Gulf. It favors the GFS though, not as strong, but it does favor the GFS and track. Moves up straight north into the Panhandle. Weakens a little bit before landfall, probably a Category 2 on landfall. So, and then up into Georgia as a tropical storm. So that's most of the models. Here's a very zoomed in hurricane model as well. Um, here's there's Jamaica on the right there. Probably not going to feel any impacts according to this. Western Cayman Islands and the outer bands could get some pretty gusty winds and rain with that. Um, Here comes Cuba. This black line right here. This is the western edge of Cuba, and we have a strengthening storm here. Pretty strong storm. This is showing a sub 960 millibar low pressure. So solid Category 3 hurricane right here, crossing Cuba, still strengthening due to it not being as much over the higher mountainous areas farther east. Crosses into the Gulf, still strengthening. I mean, sub 940. This is a high end Category 4 probably at this point. Um, Category 5 possibly. Is this thing? But then it starts to weaken. You can see the dry air kind of filtering in, cutting off the. You can see the eye wall very strong down here, but then as soon as it starts to move north some more, that dry air just really shuts down the core of the system, and it weakens before landfall too, almost to a tropical storm by landfall. So that's that zoomed in hurricane model. Here's Florida right here. You can see. Um, but yeah, so I want to go into kind of why it's showing um, weakening upon landfall. So let's go into okay, here we go. Here's the European model. And you can see the blues here are very moist air. The browns are dry air. Um, you can see here. Look to the south. This will be where the storm's coming from. Here it comes, right across Cuba as a hurricane there. You can see this blue all around the system's got a very nice moist bubble around it, keeping it protected. You've got a stout cold front moving southeast across the U.S. here, and very impressive, like a clash of different weather patterns here. You got extreme dry air, you've got a extreme moist air around this hurricane here colliding. And the difference here between why the GFS is so much weaker as it makes it farther north is because the European likes the idea of pulling it into Florida before that dry air can really get a firm hold on the system. You can see here it's wrapping that dry air around as it pushes into the system. It's really pulling in that dry air, but by that time the storm's already moving into western Florida, and it doesn't have time to really weaken it as much. And the moisture still kind of hangs on. This is in the upper atmosphere. The moisture still kind of hangs onto the core of the system for the most part. The GFS, however, where is it? Where's my tab go? Where'd my tab go? Okay, we can just switch here. Here's the GFS. Here's that cold front moving south. Strong hurricane moving toward the Florida Panhandle, and that dry air just wraps around the bottom, gets in on the southern side, and just opens the system up. You can see the blues around the system turning to brown. That core eventually gets infiltrated by dry air, and it weakens a lot before it can make landfall. So, um, that's the main thing to watch with this. If it decides to stay off the coast of Florida, will the dry air be able to weaken it down from a major hurricane to a low end hurricane? Um, Either way, it's going to be a bad system for Florida, whether or not it weakens. Um, lots of flooding rains, gusty winds, power outages, trees down, regardless of whether it's a tropical storm, Category 1, Category 4, whatever. It's still going to be a bad system, and it's definitely a good time to prepare right now. Um, so now we can take a look at what's kind of driving this system, which direction it's going to take. Will it move? Oh wait, hold on. I want to go back out. Let's go back. I wanna look at what's driving it. So let's zoom out if we can to, let's see. We'll zoom out here. Okay. So here in the left side of the screen is where we want to focus. You can see there's this reds are ridging, the blues are troughs. This blue down here is the hurricane. And typically, the hurricane is gonna want to go toward this trough, this weakness. It's gonna want to fall into that. The ridging wants to prevent it from doing that. So you can see the storm moving north right here. It's getting tugged toward this, and as soon as it starts to get north, this trough really weakens a lot. This trough weakens a lot right here, and the ridging starts to cover over the northern side of the storm. And because of that, the storm doesn't really have any way to go. I mean, the flow around this ridging here is east to west along the southern side of it, and it's pulling the storm west. Meanwhile, this trough is pulling it kind of northeast. So it's just kind of like it has no way really to go. Um, it's getting pushed on by both sides, and so it just kind of like stalls out over Florida, and eventually the ridging covers it, and it decides to move back west as it feels that flow east to west. Um, so that's one thing to watch for is how strong this trough pulls on the system as it gets close enough to it. Will it pull it northeast fast enough, or will the ridging be strong enough to hold it down? Um, it's going to be a tough call. So it's little things like that that's going to make a big difference on the direction this storm takes. Let's look at the GFS. GFS really likes to move this